Hey guys, here I am with the third part, the business of hate. Now it's about how do I grow? How do I try to build this business? Did I even recognize it as a business at that point? I'm not completely sure about that in my memory. I definitely saw an opportunity. Okay, maybe I can actually make something happen here in the short term, so maybe I'll just give it a try. I didn't really see it as a huge, super opportunity yet, but it was an opportunity. Everything else I had tried before only went so-so, but now there was actually a real need. And I saw, okay, what they're doing there in that mail order, in that neo-Nazi mail order business, it's not rocket science. And then I left, took some CDs for my own collection, also CDs that this mail order dealer had a hard time selling, but which were very much in demand in the neo-Nazi scene. It's a bit paradoxical because it's often not about how good the music is, the singing or the music, but how hard the message is, how strong does the cover look, how xenophobic is it, how anti-Semitic is it, and so on. So there are a lot of bad bands that make bad music with bad lyrics, but they have a hard message. And that's why they are celebrated by right-wing extremists, just like I used to do. I think that's a phenomenon that only exists like this in right-wing extremism. In the music scene, though, feel free to comment below. So I had taken this music with me. I had brought music that he couldn't put in the shop either. He had realized for himself that CDs that weren't well known, or at least not immediately noticeable, as I said here with Stahl, Bekommen, Schlacht 88, etc., are quickly noticed by state security and the Office for the Protection of the Constitution. Instead, he focused on bands with English lyrics and so on. But of course, there were also very clear CDs there. If they're inside, a house search is done immediately, so everything happens quickly. He didn't sell those in his shop. He mostly kept them in suitcases. He himself was once... He started selling suitcases at concerts, which led him to open a far-right mail order business, but he stopped attending the concerts. Those CDs were just unused like dead capital, and he had a few hundred of them. Then I took a few from him at first. I added to my own collection, and then I also had CDs, maybe 5 of them, 4 of them again, 3 of them, only 1, and so on. I took them with me and thought, yeah, I'll get rid of them when I contact comrades or look around in my own circle. By then, I'd already narrowed my circle. That means I had already imagined that I would find a certain distribution channel over the internet. And as I already mentioned, back then I was active in certain forums. One was called Hatecore or Hatecore TK, and the other was a forum from the Viking Versand. There were really several thousand people there who commented on all sorts of things, as I said. And now I had these CDs at home. I drove home, and of course I wanted to. I had produced the t-shirts and paid in advance. Now, of course, I also had to get rid of these CDs that I had taken with me, several copies of them. I knew it wouldn't be a problem at all, that if you offered the CDs, they'd be taken right away. There are certain pieces that are collected. There was a great passion for collecting back then, and it was no problem at all to get rid of them. But still, I had a bit of fear mixed in with crap. I already assumed that even in these forums, so to speak, the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, State Security, the State Criminal Police Office, and other agencies also monitor there. They can also use a pseudonym, right? So I see Stahlkappenboy 88, Heil Germany, and they can join in the conversation and so on and make contact. That's not a big deal either. And I had already expected that. So first I wrote to the people I was more familiar with in this forum, so to speak. At that time, I didn't have any personal contacts in this forum yet. The idea was that we would have a forum meetup, so to speak, and we'll get to that later. So, as I said, I also talked about it with my girlfriend at the time, Melanie, who was still active here in her medical profession and in her family. As I said, someone, her older brother, also plays in a band. And there she also said, well, I know this person and that person too. She had good connections in Saxony and said she could also send CDs there. And then I thought, my goodness, there really are a few more distribution channels opening up here than I first thought, even without us setting up an online shop right away so people can see it directly. Because that was still too risky for me since I only had these forbidden things. And then I said, no, I don't need that right now either. I was still on probation and I just couldn't really use that right now. And that's why, okay, let's organize the distribution channels that are possible now. That means, first of all, your first true friends, your circle of friends, comrades, so to speak, the ones you know personally, you can offer them CDs. And then through those, I already know on the internet, over the internet. Then through the connection via her brother and the connection to her contacts in Saxony. Because back then she had contacts with that group that was in the media now, in Chemnitz. Unara, from that circle, there's also a band called Blitzkrieg and so on. And there were connections there, so I thought, okay, we can do that. That's how I imagined it too. So I took about 200 CDs with me, kept 30 for myself, and then thought, well, how long could this take? And I have to say, they were snatched out of my hands. They were literally snatched out of my hands. So I made a kind of list, a proper Excel list, and entered the CD titles there and then sent it to friends. Some people quickly grabbed 10, 12, or 15 copies and asked if they should transfer the money. I said, sure, transfer the money. I wasn't sure either. Should I include that in my taxes? Do I want it? What do I say? What is it? What title does it have? And where did I get it from? And so on. Those were all problems I was facing. I actually preferred to do a cash business. That was really my favorite at the time. I can say it again and again. If you want to do cash business permanently, the bill or receipt will come eventually in the end. And that went relatively quickly. We then, I kind of introduced it that way. I then opened a post office box here in Lübeck. And I then said, well, it's better if you send it. It's better if you send it cash in an envelope, yeah, or in a package so that it's an envelope and can't be seen. Send an insured package, put the money in there, and I'll send the CDs once the money arrives. So first of all, really as conspiratorial as possible, of course, all through digital media and so on. But at that point, I kind of blocked that out a bit. That happened pretty quickly, that there was really a flow, that about 100 or so had been pushed through. Yeah, I felt important. Yeah, I thought like, wow, crazy, now I have it, now I get it, now I can get access to things that nobody else can, and so on. You grow from that and feel more important. That's also a phenomenon, it's always like that. Especially a lot of people who are now active in this scene, who play music or produce music and so on, they also reach 3 meters in height and width. It was the same for me. I had the forbidden things, felt important and so on. Of course, you grow from that, and once you've had that feeling, you don't want to give it up so quickly. I'll say the best titles, in quotation marks, that's what was meant by the best titles. The ones that were really, really intense, the ones that were hard to get and so on, they were, of course, a huge hit, but now I had a problem. Despite earning money, I still needed to learn business management. The money came in and went out. Yeah, that's wasn't yet developed enough in business terms that I set aside reserves for new organizations and so on. I thought, yeah, cool. Then I'll just call him again and then just give him another 200 t-shirts. Yeah, I made that call pretty quickly. I then called him. I don't even know how I got his, which name I gave him. I'll have to write that down later. And I called him and asked, do you still need anything from me? T-shirts, I had those 3 or 4 designs. And he said, no, the others have to sell out first. And I was like, oh no. What do you mean, you smoke? Nothing. Well, it's not like you're just offering a t-shirt from... Yeah, what do I know? What was in for bands back then, I don't know. It's not that important now. Maybe something like Steel Thunder or the Lunico Conspiracy or something like that. that you that means my shirt sales, just like that. A fun shirt with a hooligan message isn't exactly something the neo-Nazi scene has been waiting for. And then I thought, yeah, okay, damn. And then in the end, it got me. This shipping company brought it up and said, well, can you produce other things too? Then I asked, what do you mean by that? Yeah, just come by again and then we'll talk about it. And then you can also check it out a bit. Commission, you can take some CDs. I thought, commission, great. I'll go there, and immediately I said, yes, I'll get in my car tomorrow and head over to you. And then I rushed over to him pretty quickly. The distance could be covered within an hour. And then he was very direct because I said yes. And personally, it fit well. So that was already okay. That he then said to me, well, I could imagine it. So can't you bring a few shirts with you? We need some more striking ones. More striking messages. Or from some bands or something. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Can I just print a shirt from any band? So, no idea. Yeah, well, the right-wing scene is also very well known for always raising a finger and warning very quickly here. That's what I thought. So, about the bands? No, I mean that I just take a design from a CD, like steal the design from the CD and then somehow print it on a t-shirt. I said, no, I can't do that. I don't think that was his intention behind it either. But he said, well, maybe you could do something like that, you know, with a bit more of a political message on it. Yeah, so not just a skinhead boot stomping on something or ACB or something like that, but we need something that really hits where we can quickly push through 500 or 1,000 t-shirts. And I thought 500 or 1,000 t-shirts in retail, 15 euros for 1,000 CDs. The distribution is going well. That's not a problem. We'll handle it. I'll figure something out. And that's how I even got the idea to really get into the political production of t-shirts. I still had a bit of concerns about where this would lead. I knew that the mail order dealers had also published from time to time, like in fan magazines, yeah, house searches, another CD banned, something confiscated here, and so on. I figured t-shirts weren't a big deal, but CDs, if I just share them with friends and acquaintances, everything will be fine. And I still had eBay, I still had that too. And that was also an important thing. I went back and within just a few days, when I was back, I sat down and checked what was actually available on the internet. In the United States for designs for t-shirts, and there were always so many t-shirts where right-wing extremists really go for them. Yeah, if you kind of modify a Waffen-SS skull a bit, yeah, it has like cracks in the skull. And when you close it up, you can still recognize it as a Waffen-SS skull and so on. And I thought, well, okay, I think that's the direction he wanted. And then we really sat down and just started working on it a bit. And then we had about 4 or 5 ideas. And the mail order company then said, yeah, we could work with that. And he said, yeah, I'd take 100 of those, 100 of those, and so on. I was already feeling really good about it, but I thought, wait, didn't we say 500? So what's going on? And he said, well, you know, the craziest thing now, of course, is that this music is playing so much. This, like I said, this, what did they used to call it? Orange County, Nazi rock or something like that. Yeah, something like that. I don't even know the name of that band or what they're called. No idea. So, like, half punk hardcore, kind of a mix, and hard to describe. Definitely for me. And that these bands are so hyped, especially, yeah, this old badly played German stuff should somehow die out. Now, everything was to become professional, and these bands were heavily hyped. Kind of like, yeah, the first Nazi rock stars. There were also the first bands in Germany that got hyped like that. And then he said, well, that's what we need. So I said to myself, yeah, okay, but I can't just do something with that. And then I rummaged through my CD collection and thought to myself, and I looked at the CDs, and then on the American CDs that I had gotten, The labels were on there. They were back then labels like Resistance, Panzerfaust, and so on. And some of the bands had also started printing an email address on their CDs by then. And I thought to myself, my goodness, that really wasn't quite. It wasn't for nothing that I lived in England. So I wrote them emails and said, listen, my name is Philip Schlaffer. I worked under a pseudonym for years in the mail order business. And I wrote, I'm from Germany and I produce t-shirts, and that I would like to produce t-shirts. I sent these emails to the labels, bands, and others, and I got a response really quickly. It went super fast that I got answers, and the bands wrote back to me like this. Like, yeah, basically, are you already interested in that and the CD? And so on, but they didn't get anything for the CD, yes, so they weren't really compensated for it by the label. And I thought to myself, like, okay, I knew here in Germany at least that pretty large high amounts were paid for the popular bands. And they said, yeah, but in America it doesn't sell that well, and the bands had no insight into that. They only did it as a fun project, just to record some hate as a fun project, and then they had some really awesome bands actually replied to me, like really awesome bands from that scene who were really, really popular. And they replied to me, yeah, sure, from this or that CD, for example, you could use the cover. And then if you produce t-shirts or something, would it be okay if we get a few free t-shirts or something like that? So you want to get paid so I could do that. It's not a problem for you. Yeah, sure. As producers, you basically don't want any money at first. You just want a few free copies. So, I don't know, send you 10 t-shirts. Yeah, of course, I immediately agreed and thought, that's awesome. And I really wrote to a lot of bands like that. And when some bands actually wrote back, well, they weren't completely convinced. Then I said, okay, look, for every t-shirt sold, you'll get $2. So I said, okay, I'll produce 200, 300, 400 or more pieces. Someone said he might take 500 t-shirts and you'll get $1,000. Yeah, they thought I was trying to mess with them, and I was like, no, everything's okay. So if you say I can use this or that design from this or that CD, then I'll send you $100 or $200 today already. And they freaked out. They agreed immediately, and I thought, now I've found my niche. Now I'm going to become a really big t-shirt producer for neo-Nazi bands from the United States, or maybe even for bands from Germany. And how the drama, so to speak, unfolds, what happens pretty quickly after that, I'll tell you about in the next part. And if you have any background information about these stories, about these they are, yes. Yes, they are behind it. We also give lectures and do anti-violence work there, but almost no one watches these credits anyway. I always see the YouTube analytics or Google analytics, so it's really not a problem. But to properly finish the video, I want to thank everyone who comments here, who leaves a thumbs up, and if you think I'm crap, then give it a thumbs down. Watching something you consider crap reflects more on you than on me. With that, I say ahoy from the coast. Guys, thank you. Hey guys, I'm back with the fourth part, the business of hate. The first idea is now bearing fruit. Fruit contacting bands from the United States of America and for the T-shirts to produce and then sell them wholesale in Germany, but also in exchange for CDs. And I was very, very quickly successful in writing to these big bands who also gave their approval relatively quickly. What I didn't know was that in the United States of America, there was a very manageable music scene, meaning there was a manageable number of musicians. They were significantly more professional than the musicians who were active here in Germany at that time. And those were like core people, maybe 10 or 12 of them, even spread across the United States of America back then, who somehow worked together in most of the bands that came out. In one band, he played drums, Then in another band he sang, they changed their name. Then one guitarist played for all 4 bands, just looking for a new singer each time. Because they just wanted, as much as possible, they wanted to make music. And at some point it was clear to them, okay, that goes over well in Germany, and if we keep going like this, we'll get invited to Germany with the bands too. Of course, that's also a huge deal for them. When neo-Nazi concerts take place in Germany or Europe, it's actually pretty good financially for these musicians, most of whom haven't been there before. From what I remember and what I've heard, they were mostly typical day laborers in the United States. Then something happened through the music to be invited to Europe for 3 weeks with flights, expenses, accommodation, being treated like rock stars everywhere. And of course, that had an effect. And that's why they tried to produce more and more. And then I had the CDs, I actually had the CDs, and then I wrote to them. One of them said, if you do it for our band, I'm also in other bands and you can do it for them too. And then I really started doing it excessively. I actually wrote to everyone, and many replied and said, yes, I heard you did that, you paid, you sent money right away. So I did that. I often sent dollars as cash. I exchanged them here at the bank. At that time, I couldn't do it through PayPal or other systems, so I didn't do it that way. They preferred cash. Some also did bank transfers, but it wasn't as easy as it is nowadays. So I exchanged dollars, and then I kept sending the dollars. I sent them in letters, or I often put together packages as well. And then over there, I still had some. Then I packed the free t-shirts in there, a bottle of Jägermeister, a personal letter, some drinking horns, and so on. Stuff like that from the Nordic faith, books and so on. I did it because I thought it would go well, had a good feeling, and it was working. I benefited from it too, so I don't think they had any idea. They really thought only 50 or 100 pieces would be sold here, but production picked up pretty quickly. Then 100, 200, even 300 pieces were moving through, so you could make good sales. Still, I was in a dilemma. Of course, I had to get rid of the swapped CDs, even if they were illegal. And that would still turn out to be a problem. That would still become a problem. But let's get back to a CD sale in a moment. But what the band sent me back then, they often had great packaging. They had these little CD booklets that were included back then. They were well designed. They had graphics. I mean, they had tattoo artists who drew cool pictures and stuff on the CDs. Everything always seemed better here, like the big mail order company in Germany back then. Rockorama, yeah, he somehow took a picture from some history book, and there was a tank on it, and then something was put over it. Then something was written over it with paint. Tank Squad Band, Storm for Germany or something like that. And that was the design, and of course the Americans were significantly better at that. When I replied, I said I could send graphics, had an idea, and someone here was drawing something for me. And it all went pretty quickly after that. The big advantage was that you could now exchange data relatively quickly by email, right? I was able to have them edited here, and sometimes I had to do so. Thank God I had found this print shop, and the son was pretty good from this printing company. The son was skilled with graphics and often customized them for me, adding elements and lettering. They also wanted the big print jobs. If you quickly run through 500 t-shirts, that's a nice job for them too, and they didn't ask for anything more. There were also things that happened, of course, that went wrong like that. There are also 1 or 2 funny anecdotes. For example, I wrote to a band from the United States of America. They were called Intimidation 1 at the time. So I wrote to them and they said, oh, cool, yeah, we want that too. We've also heard that the thing with the money works and so on. So it spread pretty quickly that I was a reliable partner for Germany. I said, I'd like to make a t-shirt for you. What do you think? First edition, 200 pieces. I'd send you about 10 free shirts at first and then send the money afterwards. He agreed and said they'd start working on it. And I have to say, communicating with the Americans, with the American neo-Nazis was always like, yo, bro. And they're always very short-spoken. Everything is always very non-committal. So at that point, I also got used to always keeping these emails. I have them. I still have my my old GMX inbox that I use for that, and I still have those. I think there are over 20,000 or 25,000 emails in there from shipping. I got used to it since they were so non-committal, and I can't remember. Yeah, that's what we discussed. So I got used to keeping emails. I'm also part of a huge data octopus. You can check on Patreon to see who supports the channel, as that data updates periodically. But what definitely happened now is that he told me, yeah, I'll send you a design. They were on a concert tour, and we wanted to make a t-shirt for it. Yeah, Storm Over Europe or something like that. That's just from memory, kind of. I said, sure, finish the design and send it to me. I'm excited to see what you create. Oh, of course, I wanted to produce pretty cool t-shirts, I have to say. So it wasn't just about, just printing Germany on it, printing, and it was supposed to have a bit more style, the bands. It shouldn't be so obvious right away. It was also this change, from this skinhead scene to a movement like they call themselves today. This right-wing extremist scene constantly reinvents itself to attract more people. That was the first time it really happened. It's a movement, if you will, away from combat boots and so on, and more into the hardcore scene, a hatecore scene, and so on. That's what they call it. Or, like streetcore punk or something like that. It was meant to go mainstream, so the clothing had to match. I waited for him to send the design. He said, yes, we wanted to use the borders of the Greater German Reich and then mark the places where we played. And then 2 of the concerts had also been raided by the police. Then something like a forbidden comes across. A forbidden and here, carried out here and so on. So that's how it was supposed to be pushed up. And then I said, yeah, okay, cool. Send it over to me. And did they design it? And then I'm sitting in front of my inbox, and then a new message from Intimidation 1 in my inbox. And then I go up, and you know how it goes. I open the file, and I'm thinking, that's not it. The Greater German Reich, yes, that was for me. As an old geography specialist, it was clear to me that they didn't manage to do that. In the fight for the Führer, the people, and the fatherland, to get the Americans out, to see what the Greater German Reich looked like at its greatest extent. That's what they wanted to do. The borders of 42. He sent me France and then wanted me to write about it, Greater German Reich and so on. And, well, I wasn't really up for it then, just like today, I wasn't really up for it. Well, here I am. I said, well, did you attach the wrong file? Yeah, why? And no, I said, I think you sent me the wrong card. You sent me France. And then, yeah, and then they did. We really went back and forth about it. And I was like, oi, me. And then you sit there and you want to, I still wanted to do it for them. But that was such a wake-up call for me, where I said, like, damn, my goodness, yeah. If you can't even manage that, yeah, on the CDs, of course, they're all way up front, really intense. Because they don't have to consider anything. They don't have to care about other people's feelings. In the United States, protected by their freedom of speech. That's also a point of discussion. We can gladly discuss that in a live stream sometime. And then I pretty much said something like, well, I'll just send them to you and then you tell me the cities and then I'd rather just finish it myself. Yeah, he thought that was a good idea, so he said I should rather do it with the Greater Germans, and then I just finished it like that. He was one of the people I communicated with, and afterward you write some trivial personal things. Hey, how are you, bro? And I asked again when they would come to Europe and that we could meet then. And he says, yeah, I really want to go to Berlin too. And my grandpa also fought in the final battle for Berlin. So I asked, did he come with the Red Army? Why? No, he was a volunteer and made it through on his own. With most Americans I've met, there was always something about them, like they had great heroes in their family. And this connection, it was always really exaggerated, make it great. Yeah, so that's an experience I've had with American neo-Nazis. So you couldn't even pick out the right map. You really had no idea, about what was actually going on, really. To me, just a punk rocker and, typically a southerner, checked it, sent it over to the printer. He speaks about as much English as I do Indian, and nothing worked out. I sent it over to him and had a first edition of 200 copies printed there. They were white t-shirts with a black Viking holding a drinking horn and the band name. Am I getting them back? I'm excited. I unpack them, check them out, and take his picture. And I say, today the 200 t-shirts came back from production. And I sent him the picture and write back to him, "Hey Phil, is that already the finished Hey Harry? I once called myself Philip Schlaffer. Hey Harry, is that already the printed t-shirt?" I didn't really react to it because there's a mistake on it. There's an error. There's a U missing in the band name. Oh yeah, that's what happens when you make your own designs, when you check things yourself. Yeah, so check twice, print once. And then I thought, I wrote to him, "No, that's just a sample t-shirt." And he was like, "Well, I'm glad about that. It would be awful to throw away the 200 t-shirts now." Dude, the t-shirts were at my place back then, still in my parents' small apartment, and I thought, shit, I didn't see that. But I checked it then, and he actually sent me the wrong graphic. But I don't want to pass the blame on. I'm responsible. I'm not really good at that anyway, but I checked it and thought, man, this can't be true. I wrote to the printer, asking if he noticed. He replied he didn't know the band's name, so couldn't tell. I said, yeah, okay, I didn't expect it from him and don't know the band's name. And I said, damn, 200 pieces, they already cost me about 1,200 euros plus value added tax in production. And I thought, this can't be true. I asked what we could do, and he said it was done with screen printing. He said we can flex print black over the bottom, then add the band name on top like that. I agreed, jumped in the car, rushed to the print shop with the sample and 200 t-shirts, and asked to make a sample shirt. Then he really used flex, so that's how it works. It's a kind of foil. The foil is cut out, and then it's ironed onto the t-shirt. And with that, you could basically iron over the wrong print. That's what we did. Starting with 200 t-shirts was another financial challenge. And then I went back with the finished t-shirts. I took photos of them, sent them back to the band in the United States and said, oh yeah, now this is the right design. And then they were like, yeah, but why did you put a black bar down there? And I said, I thought it looked cooler that way and all. Yeah, okay, yeah, we think it doesn't look worse either. So I think to this day, it hasn't come out that this t-shirt, I think 500 were produced later. For the second edition, I intentionally added a black bar at the bottom with the band name. I did the second edition like that, printed over it, and then sent it to the band and paid for it. And he was very influential and said he would get in touch with other bands and so on. And then I realized, I said, okay, this has to, but I did. I actually produced those things and I had to pay for them too when I had invested 2,000 or 3,000 in them. I needed one. I also needed a cash flow in the account, yeah, for the printer. I couldn't do cash deals there. And while my usual shipping place allowed them, I also needed transactions to go through my account. I had to pay some taxes, health insurance, and my regular expenses. I also didn't want to stand out much as self-employed. That means I really had to think about how I could generate official income as well. So I started selling t-shirts, writing receipts, depositing the money into my account and so on. But that was still excessive. I didn't have a big network here, so I couldn't say, I went out and sold about 40 t-shirts in one day and said, okay, I'll deposit the 1,000 euros now or something like that. It hadn't gotten that far yet. And it definitely started off well. And then others also got in touch who could also do such releases, which they had. Word got around that I could get most of the t-shirt designs approved because that was the first wave. At first, many print shops also rejected such designs, so they couldn't find any print shops. That wasn't all that easy. Paying in advance and trusting is always the case, even when people mention camaraderie, loyalty, respect, and similar words. There's not much to it. People only trust from the wall to the wallpaper. There's not much to it. That's how it is. In any case, I was supposed to pull off my first coup pretty quickly. That's when I really said, okay, now this can work. Now you're really taking the big step. Here's what happened. I began spending time in a Viking mail order forum. I think you can say that's good, so it's been said now. And I hadn't fully committed 100% yet, as I said, to this shipping and trading business. I was still kind of halfway in, but not completely, not 100%. And it was like this. In this forum, there were very, very different kinds of people. So there were the old school skinheads. There were the so-called Kraken, you know, the ones who buy everything from patches to Germany stickers, T-shirts with Germany or iron crosses on them. And then there were also the highly politicized ones who wanted to take this step towards becoming a movement. Arguments including insults, and I'll come to you if you don't agree with me, and then I'll kidnap your hamster and smash your microwave, and so on. So there was a very, very rough atmosphere. I quickly made contacts there, participated actively, and had time for it. I also wanted to use that to network, to recruit new bands, to sell t-shirts and so on. And trust develops pretty quickly after that. It always surprises you when you hear in the media how the police get into such networks and so on. When you've messaged back and forth 10 times and you've dissed and argued with each other in a forum against someone else, writing down opinions, then you send each other a private message and say, I feel the same way. And where are you from? Yeah, I'm so-and-so from Berlin and from Munich. And then you've already exchanged numbers, sent a text message and so on. And then he said, yeah, I know you do stuff with t-shirts and so on. And then he said something else like, yeah, I still have a few CDs lying around and so on. Without ever having seen each other or just having exchanged a few text messages, you build trust pretty quickly. It happens very, very fast. And yeah, that's when I started to also get these illegal CDs, at least in packs of 20 or 30. I kept exchanging with the nearby shipping service and sent them all over Germany. I didn't really think much about it back then. I thought, well, okay, you can trust the people from the forum, everything will work out fine. So I wasn't worried. But then someone messaged me in that forum saying he was from Blattnerner, Austria, specifically Blattnerner, Vienna, and said he heard from American friends that I print t-shirts and they would like to organize more concerts. And apparently they had to deal with a blow from the state security, I don't know what it's called in Austria, and they needed to recover from that blow. He wrote to me saying we need to raise some money to organize a new concert. We need money for lawyers right now and so on. Don't you want to make a support t-shirt for Blattnerner? Blattnerner was banned at that time. That had happened relatively recently. Blattnerner is a youth movement or an adult movement founded by Ian Stewart, the singer of Screwdriver. They wanted to create a network against other CD dealers. Back then, they wanted to organize concerts. They wanted to connect across Europe. They considered themselves elite. Today, I think there are still plenty of people who see themselves as successor organizations to these old structures and so on. And he wrote to me and said, Philip, if you can handle the distribution there, I'll send you a design and then try to push it through. And then he negotiated hard with me about what he wanted. I recall he wanted $250 per t-shirt as his share, which is a lot considering production costs. I thought this thing would break through and take off. I saw that. I just didn't know yet how much trouble it would cause me. And where the trouble came from, I'll tell you next time, and how it then went to a big concert in France. Thanks for listening. Check out Patreon below to become a channel partner and get exclusive background info. You're also welcome to donate to the association. If you want to support the association in its youth work against extremism, you're welcome to do that too. If you want to support this, mention it in the comments. You can give a thumbs up, you can give a thumbs down. Just try to keep it reasonably objective. As always, I'll sign off with an ahoy from the coast.